live. I'll give it a few seconds until I can see the names. Just to see. And you are here, right? We are live. It started from the first attempt today, so that's amazing. Let me see the chat. Hi Tish, hi Linda, hi Elizabeth. Welcome everyone. Welcome to Loudun. So I'll just give it a minute so we can wait a minute until everyone joins. And Charles the First is here. Hi Charles, nice to have you here. Welcome Satyam. Hi Nathalie. Great picture. Yeah, I'm using an app called Streamlab. That's usually quite good so far. We're still learning, but yeah. Oh, great, Dr. Benita. So let's just give it a minute. It's nice to see you too. And it's been a minute, so let's go. So welcome to Loudun. Just a bit of housekeeping as usual. You've got the chat. Feel free to use it. Ask me any questions. If it's about the stories, I might know. If it's about the town itself, I could, there might be some stuff I don't know because it's the first time I come here. I've arrived this morning, but I had never been here before. And so the questions, go ahead. If you wanted to take any screenshot of the stream as well, you can do that, and you can share them on social media, like live virtually, or on my Facebook group, Nathalie, my guide. If you take some nice ones, you might want to share them because there's still a lot of people that don't know how to do them. So that'll be nice to share. And you can also tip me on PayPal or buy me a coffee. You should have the links at the beginning of the chat. I've been pinning them, so you should be able to find them up there. Thank you, Lynn. And just in case, if we have anyone joining us for the first time, just to explain why everyone or a lot of people know each other in the chat, because I used to stream on a different platform called Heygo. So I've just recently moved into YouTube. So if you're joining me for the very first time and you're surprised that we all know each other, that's why. So you're very welcome. And let's go. Oops. So we are in the cemetery in Loudun. So Loudun, it's the name of the town. It's a small town, 6,000 inhabitants. Yes, today it's dark story. It looks like I've lost you for a second, but it's all back now. So Lug was a Celtic god, and actually Léon is also named after Lug. Are we all good with the signal? Is it all back on? Because it said trying to connect, but it seems to be back on. Give me a thumbs up if we're good. Are you guys still here? Yeah, okay, perfect, good. So I think it was just a sec. Anyway, so yes, dark history today. But before to go into dark history, I'll show you an interesting gentleman buried here. In that little chapel, by the way, they exhumed and they kind of cut off a few bodies here in 1949 to be precise. But I'll tell you about those in a little while. For now, let's go and see an interesting gentleman that's buried here. He died in 1904, and I'm sure you would have heard of his name. I'll show you his grave. So it's actually this one here. But you won't be able to see the name here. So I'll show you his dad. His dad is the next one, and you might recognize the name straight away. So that's the last name, Gilles de la Tourette. I'm sure some of you might recognize it from the Tourette's syndrome. So that's his dad, Léon, but the actual doctor was George Gilles de la Tourette. I know it's a weird name. Gilles de la Tourette is the last name. So you might recognize it from the Tourette's syndrome. You know, those people that suffer from tics that can sometimes be verbal. So we know them, of course, because of some people suffering from Tourette's. They'll sometimes say obscenities and stuff like that. not everyone with Tourette's syndromes actually have some verbal tics. Some of them are physical. And Gilles was, as a young boy, he was actually quite not very disciplined. A very smart boy, but not very... he didn't find it easy to focus. Today we might actually diagnose him with ADD, sorry. And Gilles actually studied medicine, and he ended up working in Paris. He's from here originally, that's why he's buried here. But he ended up working in Paris with a very famous neurolog called Jean-Martin Charcot. Charcot was working on hypnosis and hysteria. Hysteria was mainly for women. Hysteria, it comes from uterus, the term, in Greek. So they were studying all that, and George, Gilles de la Tourette, he was particularly interesting in a case of a gentleman that used to go to Le Moulin Rouge, and he used to tap his cane on the ground through the performances, and he couldn't stop it. It was a tic that was very annoying for the audience, and Gilles was really George, not Gilles. Gilles was really George was really interested by the what happened, and he studied the case, and he actually decided to call this disease la maladie des tics, so the tic syndrome. And Charcot was like, no, you've discovered it, so let's call it Gilles de la Tourette after yourself. So that's how the syndrome was diagnosed. And George literally discovered that it was not, it's a neurological disease. It's not psychiatric at all. It's nervous. It's the nervous system. Anyway, before we go anywhere else, this is the family Besnard. We'll see quite a few Besnard in this, there's many of them in this graveyard. And remember that name for later. We're not going to go too deep into that case quite yet, but remember Besnard. I know it's spelled Besnard, but we say Besnard in French. Anyway, back to George. So he named the syndrome, and he studied a lot of those cases for many years. So he became a very renowned doctor in Paris. And he lost his son, and Charcot also died, and then he started to suffer some suppose that he might have been depressed, and then he started to have some irrational behaviors and paranoia. We think that it was actually neurological syphilis. Syphilis has different stage of the disease, and then eventually your brain is attacked. And very sadly, he was also attacked by one of his patients. She shot him 3 times, and one of the bullets ended up in his neck. He recovered, but then his mental health did not really improve. And because he was such a renowned doctor, they did not want him to publicly go mad, what they would have called mad at the time. And Charcot's son actually pretended to invite him for a trip in Switzerland, and he actually committed him into a psychiatric institution in Switzerland. So that's where he died, away from the public eye, because they didn't want anyone to know that he suffered from paranoia and what they believed at the time was schizophrenia, but probably neuronal syphilis. So very sadly, he had a sad end of life, and he's buried here because that's where he comes from. And of course, we remember him for the syndrome. Anyway, let me show you another Besnard. There's quite a few of them buried here, and a lot of them have been exhumed. Let me show you a view of the chapel from here. It's quite nice as well. There we go. So that's another Besnard grave. There are quite a few, and most of them might be murder victims. Anyway, let's go into town. So, Loudun, as Linda was mentioning here, it is it's darkish, very small town. We are in the department of Vienne. To give you an idea, a lot of you were with me yesterday in Tours. We are about an hour south of Tours. It's a small town. It's very little known, but it's got a lot of dark history. So that's why I really wanted to come here. And in the 17th century, there was, a few exorcisms here. There were a lot of people being possessed. What happened is that, in the 17th century, we had a lot of wars of religion in France between the Protestants and the Catholics. So we are at the time under Louis XIII, and you might have heard of Cardinal de Richelieu. If you've read the movie The Three Musketeers, or if you read the movie, no, you don't read movies. If you've seen the movie, or if you've read any of the books, in The Musketeers, Cardinal de Richelieu is the bad guy. The Three Musketeers were actually written in the 19th century, but it's based on historical facts. And at the time, in the town of Loudun, just gonna wait until they go because it's a bit noisy. There was a priest called Urbain Grandier. He was giving very interesting sermons, and he was a sexy man. Ladies liked him. He was very. He was just cute, and he was a Catholic priest. So he was not meant to take any wife, and they're meant to be celibate. The Catholics, not the Huguenots, not the Protestants. And Urbain, he was having a few affairs with some local girls and local married ladies, and he had an affair with a girl of 15. She was the daughter of one of his mates, and he got her pregnant. So we know how bad it was at the time for a young girl to fall pregnant out of wedlocks. And then he basically dumped her. So he made an enemy with the father, of course, and he made quite a few enemies because he was basically having affairs with people's wife, And he actually wrote a text. He believed that priests shouldn't be celibate, that it was unrealistic to expect of a man to never have sex. So he believed that priests should have the right to marry. And of course that placed him on the side of the Protestant, really. So he was already kind of like a bit suspicious for Cardinal de Richelieu and those men in power that were stronger Catholics. And there was a convent here with a lot of nuns, cloistered nuns. So they were not allowed out. They stayed in the convent, and there was a bit of a school, so they would teach the kids, but they would never ever go out. And the Mother Superior, her name was Joan, she had contacted to ask if he would like to come to do the confessions at the convent, and Grandier politely refused. And it is after that day that suddenly at the convent, exactly, John, the Devils of Loudun. For the ones that don't know, that's a movie, a British movie that came up in 1971, you've missed a little bit Is the sound choppy? Oh, did you? So where were you in the story? What did you miss? We were talking about Grandier. So Grandier was basically a priest that was a bit flirty, let's say. So the Mother Superior wanted him to come and do the. It's all good. So he was invited to do the confessions at the convent, and he refused. And then suddenly the nuns, 17 of them at the convent, they started to act very suspiciously. They started to use blasphemy, they were swearing, they were running around naked. They believed they could see Grandier coming into their bedrooms at night. They had actually never met him. And they believed they were possessed. And then they had to be exorcised. So some priest came for the exorcism, and those apparently were literally like in the horror movies. Yeah, it's a disturbing movie. Yeah, well, it's based it's based on truth, and so those nuns apparently, according to the records at least, they were possessed. They were doing obscene stuff in front of the priest. They were exposing themselves. Their eyes would be opened for minutes without blinking. Their tongues would be out on very hard, and still speak. And with 17, one, and the Mother Superior was convinced it was Grandier. It was definitely Urbain Grandier that had used black magic to possess them, because he had made a pact with the devil. And people didn't want their kids to go to that school anymore, because of course, when you have a lot of nuns exposing themselves on stuff, you don't really want to send your kids to that school, right? And this is the town hall, by the way. I don't know why the town hall is that big, because the town really isn't that big. But yeah. And so Grandier was accused publicly, and he did not take it very seriously. No, said that's true. I've never done such. And he let's not acquitted by the ecclesiastic church. You had the justice of the men and the justice of the church. So the church did not believe him guilty, but Cardinal de Richelieu did. But he was already in a bit of an issue with Richelieu, because Richelieu had wanted to destroy the walls. We had some city walls in Loudun, and the Catholic, and they were inside the walls. So Richelieu wanted to. This is that was one of the men working with him. So that's the thing with YouTube. Signal Richelieu and Grandier. Sun is breaking up. So yeah, Grandier was then. He was. Is it any better now? Yeah, I think with Hego, I think the picture was affected first and the sound was next. Okay, we're back. Good. So Grandier is being accused. Went into his apartment and they searched, and they claimed they found some pact with the devil. They probably actually produced them. It was probably all fake, but they're still around. So those pacts with the devils are actually they've been found, and so that's the church. That's where Grandier used to preach. And well, they burned him. They burned him a bit further down. I'll show you in a moment. And then after that, Joanne, she started to perform miracles. Apparently, she wrote a biography. So that's the type of story that happened in Loudun. So for me, Grandier is innocent. I think he's a victim of the gossip and no, that's not my hometown at all, Barbara. Well, I don't really have a hometown, to be honest. I've moved quite a lot, but I never came here before. And so yeah, so that really shows you, you know, the type of thing that can happen to you because of gossip, because of people talking about you, because of people chatting in your back. And gossip might have had a big role to play in the story of Marie Besnard. So Marie Besnard, you might remember the name Besnard from the cemetery. She was a lady that lived here just after World War II. She was described, well, the report on her personality were actually quite mixed, but even as a child at school, they described her as what they called filoute. Filoute, it's like cheeky but bad cheeky, like naughty cheeky, you know. And she had quite a bit of money. She did own a bit of property here, and well, not everyone liked her, let's say. And after the war, you'd have to know that, well, you know, through the war, life was difficult. A lot of neighbors were snitching on their neighbors. You know, they would write to the Nazi to tell them that their neighbors were hiding Jews or stuff like that. And so the climate, the environment was not the nicest one. And there had been a lot of anonymous letters going around Loudun, accusing people to sleep with others, and you know. And Mary, she had a German soldier coming as a slave, kind of, as a, you know, after the war, a few German soldiers were sent back here for reparation. So they were sent here to work into the farms or to repair the country that they had damaged. And Mary was really fond of her little soldier, Aidy. He was Aidy Ditch. He was in his 20s, and she was much older. Some claim that they were actually having an affair. Probably not the case, but we don't know that for sure. And she's married to Léon. Léon Besnard was her second husband, and there was another lady in the picture, Louise Pantou. Louise was Mary's best friend. She actually lived in an accommodation that belonged to Mary. Mary had a lot of property. She had come into a few inheritance as well. And Louise was also potentially Léon's mistress. Mary Besnard, she had sadly an operation. She was, they removed her ovaries and I think her uterus as which could have been not really that for sure. But anyway, in 1937, one day, Mary and Léon, her husband, they went for a few days into Mary's family, in well, a few miles away. They had lunch, soup. And after lunch, Léon starts to feel a bit funny. He went back to the car to fix to pump the tires, and then he vomited. He felt a bit unwell, but they drove back home. They drove back to Loudun anyway, and then he's very unwell. He's bedded for like 10 days, very, very unwell. A few doctors came, and he was diagnosed with uremia. You know, it's those toxins from your kidneys. And Léon died. He's buried at Loudun Cemetery, and they were lying there. And so he's buried, and that's it for about 18 months. And months later, Louise Pantou, she went for coffee or for tea at somebody's house, Auguste Massip. Auguste lived a bit outside of town in a castle. He was a bit of an original. He was a nudist. He used to walk around naked, but lived in She says to Massip, she says, you know what, before Léon died, I was alone with him in his bedroom, and he said to me, "What did she do?" Are you guys still here? Because the chat is very quiet, so I'm a bit worried. All good? So Louise said to Massip, "Oh, still here. Okay, good. The chat is a bit delayed, so sometimes okay." So she says to him, "Before to pass away, he told me what did she give me? What did she give me?" And she's like, "Who?" "Well, Mary, of course." And he says, "What do you mean?" Well, apparently, Léon had told Pantou that he believed he might have been poisoned. And Massip was like, "Oh my God, you need to tell the authorities, you need to tell the police." And Louise is like, no. Only God can judge. We are now at the spot where Grandier was burned, by the way. We're talking about Urbain Grandier early, exactly where he was burned, centuries ago, of course. Anyway, back to Mary. So Massip is like, "Hold on, yes, it does look like poisoning. Let me look at the symptoms." So he got out a medicine book in which he looked up arsenic. And he's like, "Yes, this is arsenic poisoning. You need to tell the police." And Pantou is like, No, I'm not telling the police. I'm not telling anyone. I'm not even sure of what I've heard. No. And Massip decided to write to the magistrate accusing Mary of poisoning her husband. The authorities, though, they didn't take it very seriously, because Massip had a personality. He was very extravagant, and he had already wrote to the authorities many times before. So they've completely ignored it. And at the market, right behind me, that was the market spot, a few months later, he's kind of accusing Mary again. And she looked at him and she says, "You're a bad man. I think something bad will happen to you soon." With a lot of witnesses. A few months later, in his little castle, Massip's castle, he had a fire. So he went back to the police and he was like, "This is Marie Besnard, this is Mary. She told me something bad would happen to me, and guess what? I have a fire." The police investigated and they found out the fire actually started with a boy playing with matches. So not Mary at all. But then Massip had the opportunity to speak to a police officer again, and he again accused her of poisoning. And he also said to the police that if the circumstances, and in each and every single case, Mary got money from the inheritance. And the police officer was interested. He was a young officer. That could be the case of his life, you know. He could make a name in the justice system, you know. So the police officer started to investigate discreetly. Nothing is ever discreet in such a small town. So there were a lot of gossip, and suddenly everyone is accusing Mary of poisoning Léon and another 12. And so they decided to exhume Léon at the cemetery we were earlier, with a lot of journalists. Everyone was there taking photos, and they took samples of his body in the little chapel that we saw earlier, and they sent it down to Marseille to Dr. Bérou. Dr. Bérou was a toxicologist in Marseille, and well, the result came. The body was full of arsenic. So then they exhumed the other 12 bodies. I actually have the list. They exhumed Auguste Antini, that was Mary's first husband, 60 grams of arsenic. Marie Lecombe Labrèche, she was the great aunt of Léon, 35 grams of arsenic. Toussaint Rivet, Léon's friend, 18 grams of arsenic. Pierre Davaillot, 36 grams of arsenic. Louise Gauvin Labrège, 40 grams. She was the grandmother of Léon. Marie-Louise Besnard and Marcelin Besnard, mother and father of Léon, 49 and 60 grams of arsenic. Lucie Besnard, she had hanged herself. She died by suicide. Léon actually surely not accuse Mary of that death, right? Well, they did. They said she might have hung herself, but she was being slowly poisoned. Blanche Lebeau, widow of Rivet, the friend that we mentioned earlier, 30 grams of arsenic. Pauline Laleron, cousin of Léon. You'd have to know that some of those people were quite old, and they were in their 80s, so they were close to death anyway. 48 grams. Virginie Leléron, cousin as well, 24 grams. Léon, 19 grams, and Marie-Louise Davaillot, so that's the mother of Mary, 48, and his friends were in a cemetery in a town. Now, arrested, she's eating, and everyone in town is gossiping, and they're like, yes, it must be her. She's killed them all. That's why she's so rich. She owned a cafe up there. She owned a hotel. It must be her. And she's being accused of sleeping with the little German former soldier, Addie, and people are like, yes, we've seen her. Addie was touching her breast, and we've seen them kissing in on the street, and So suddenly, all Loudun turns against her. She's Marie Besnard, l'empoisonneuse, the poisoner. And obviously, it's a massive case in the press. Everyone is talking about that crazy case. Then came the trial. She actually found some very decent lawyers. And the day of the trial, the Dr. Beroux is invited. So to isolate arsenic, you have different methods. One of them is called the MASH method. I'm not a chemist, but basically, after a chemical reaction, you've got mini little rings of silver that would create. And apparently those mini little rings, you can see them with the naked eye. And in front of the court, Mary's lawyer are challenging the Dr. Beroux from Marseille, because they wanted a counter-expertise. They wanted more people to do the same test. But, and he said to the expert, they were like, oh, so you can see those little arsenic rings with your naked eye, right? Yes, I sure can. Is it because I'm not from Paris that I'm not taken seriously? And they're like, no, okay, fair enough. Little test for you here. I've got 6 little tubes. Would I be able to show them to you? And you can isolate the ones that contain arsenic. So Dr. Beroux grabs the little tube, the 6 of them. He stares at them. He looks at the audience, and he's like, this one, number 2 and number 6. And Mary's lawyer is like, well, you know what, my friend? None of them do. None of them contain any arsenic. So the expert, Dr. Beroux, is now ridiculed. All the audience is like, Linda, I'm guessing they probably used to be stables as well. They probably used to be really high for horses, but I could be wrong on those doors. And so the expert is ridiculed. Suddenly, there's no evidence at all against Mary, because if you cannot trust those numbers with the arsenic, well, apart from a few witnesses, there's nothing, apart from gossip, there's nothing. So they had to stop the trial, to start it again once they have some new experts on the case. So Mary is sent back to prison for another few years, because the next trial actually happened in I think it was in 1953. So she's in prison for nearly 5 years. And then the second trial came up. They had found two more experts, and they had exhumed the bodies again, 12. Because one of them, so we have something in France, I think it's only in France, we call it prescription. It's when you, so if you have, you have a murder or any crime, if it's been more than, I think it's 20 years, then it doesn't count anymore. Even if you're proven guilty, you cannot be persecuted. More than 20 years later, you cannot be jailed. And Yes, a lot of people dropped dead around her, Lynn, and she made a lot of money out of them. Well, a lot. It's all relative. It's not actually that much, but she did get a few properties. And so at the time, everyone believed she's so guilty because what a coincidence. She did have so many different deaths around her, and she got money out of all of them. The thing is, some of those people were really old. They would have died anyway, you know, but yeah, at the time, everyone believed her guilty. So she's jailed again. They hired some new experts to work on the case. But, so they went with different methods. One went with the mash method, and another one it's Cribier method to isolate the arsenic. The thing that I didn't mention is that at the first trial, Mary's lawyers were really good, and they found out that in Loudun Cemetery there was a little bit of arsenic in the floor, in the ground. That is because the it was a lot of people were starving, and the gardener used to plant potatoes between the graves, and he used some kind of insect killers that was full of arsenic. So they basically buried their dead in a pool of arsenic. But the experts were still, they still believed that arsenic was not soluble in water. They still believed that it couldn't actually have got into the bodies later on. But yeah, they could have been contaminated later on. So they hired more experts for the second trial. They did some tests on the air, you know, because if you are being poisoned slow, you know, your air should, because your body is going to try to evict the arsenic anyhow they can, and you should be able to see it in the air, in all the hairs on your body. So they had great difficulties with the men, because the ladies, they could actually isolate the hair, but with the men it was much harder. And when they exhumed the bodies for the second time, they realized that the first time they had made a mess. Some of the graves were not put back together. They didn't know which body was which. One of the bodies, to give you an example, they had two drawers. They didn't have two. Anyway, we'll get back to the second trial. But while we're here, we have a lot of baguette in France, you know. Oh no, man, you've done it too quick. I wanted to show you a baguette dispenser. So you know, we love our baguettes too much in France. So you can actually, if you don't have a boulangerie, you can have a baguette machine. So you can actually buy your baguette at the machine. No, that's okay. So that's the sister here. She's bought our baguette for tonight. So yeah, you know, when you see the little French caricatures, you see the little character with baguette. So yes, that is true. French people do eat a lot of bread. It's like, I think it is about 30 kilos per person per year. I mean, it's a lot of bread. So you can have your baguette at the machine, and they're fresh, and they're baked on the day by the local baker. So that's quite cool. Anyway, let's get back to Marie Besnard. So as I mentioned, she had a hotel, she had a cafe as well. Well, the building straight ahead, that's right in the middle. So that's the hotel that used to belong to Mary. Is it warm? They're asking. Is it warm?
No.
No, it's not warm. But it is. Let me show them. It's a fresh baguette, but like probably a few hours ago at least. There we go. How much was it? €1.15. So that's a decent price for a fresh baguette. Oh, you make your own bread. Nice. Anyway, so this is the hotel there, and this is the house. So this is where Mary used to live, number 14 here. Can you have a piece? I wish soon we'll be able to give you the taste and the smell digitally somehow. I think in Japan they're actually working on tasting television. So one day. Anyway, so this is Mary's house. So at the second trial, it's been divided into two now. I don't know who lives here. I don't think he would like here. So at the second trial, the experts could not agree. The two of them had found some completely different figures. And again, they just, experts could not agree. You cannot convict anyone. She would have been guillotined, or she would have been at least executed somehow if she was indeed guilty. So they decided to pause the trial again until they could hire some more experts. And the thing is, that took, would you believe, 7 years. She was actually released with a large bail. She could not actually afford the famous girl. The lawyer said no. So it was such a famous case that Charles Trenet wanted to pay. So they released her, and she came back here. She came back to Loudun. When she came back to her property, it had been damaged and graffitied, and people had gone inside and stole her stuff and everything. But she could have gone anywhere where people would not speak badly about her. But no, she came back to Loudun and she went back to her normal life. Yeah, she was released on bail. And 7 years later, in 1961, finally she was judged again for another trial. And then Auguste Massip, the first one that incriminated her, he was such a showman. He was invited as a witness, and he made no sense, and he was shouting in front of the crowds, and he was so rude that he was kicked out of the trial. And then the persecution, they kind of realized that all that case for a man that was clearly out of his mind, So, and then Louise Pintou was called to witness again, and then even Pintou, she was not quite sure anymore. She admitted that she had some doubts. And then out of those 7 years, the people of Loudun, they kind of changed all their testimony. They were like, actually, we don't remember, because no one was convinced anymore, and the case had gone on for so long. There were a few experts that, again, they came up with different results about the arsenic, and was it soluble into water? Could it have been contaminated later on? And not all for Mary's benefit. There were a lot of arsenic in those bodies. They exhumed different bodies as well to double check but those bodies also had a little bit of arsenic, but nothing compared to the quantities they found into those bodies. We were not on 12 anymore. We were down to 7, because some of them just didn't contain enough arsenic for persecution. But eventually, in 1961, she was acquitted. She had spent, Elizabeth, 5 years in prison. She was acquitted. She came back here to Loudun. She met a gentleman again, with which she spent the rest of her life. And she died at the age of 84, I think, of bone cancer. And when she died, very surprisingly, she decided to give her body to science. So she was not buried. She gave her body for the students to dissect her, which is very unusual. Why did she do such things? Some people believe it's because she was guilty, because she did not want to be buried with Léon, because she did not want people to come and piss on her grave. Some people believe it's because she was innocent, because she felt so guilty about her, she called them her chers défunts, her dear dead. She felt so bad that her dear deads were exhumed twice, cut off twice, that maybe she wanted the same to happen to her body. Who knows? Did they test her body? Emily? No, not that I know of. You know what? Apparently, she was to have those wine tested for arsenic. I don't think that happened because she could have accidentally poisoned her as well. You know, if zinc can deteriorate into arsenic, I mean, there's many possibilities. But at the time, the court case on all the investigation was so bad on so many levels. If that happened today, we'll know straight away. And so yes, she's still a big mystery today. We still have no idea. I've just read a book, and that the author was convinced she was innocent. Well, they didn't say, but we could kind of tell from the writing. So now I'm a bit like a bit more on the innocent side. I think if she was guilty, though, she would have done it with her husband Léon. There was no way she could have done that alone. Because the people, so for example, the cousins, the people from which she inherited, she had helped them. After a war, a lot of people maybe damaged, she had them before, so she had it with her husband. Here we are planning to live, I think, but it's a new build anyway. And so the case started, Léon died in 1947, so right after World War II. But she died, I think it was 1980 when she passed. She lived there until her 80s. And it is a case that has always fascinated me because when I was a kid, my granddad was into genealogy, and one day, so the case is so famous. The sister is here with the bread. The case is so famous that there's been a few movies. I don't know if they've been translated, but and there's a new movie that came out in the 90s when I was a kid, and the trailer came up on TV, and I was with my granddad, and he said to me, "She's the cousin of your dad," and I took it very seriously because. We're not that far geographically. And because my granddad was into genealogy, when we went back to the basement, you had a massive tree on the wall. But that was his family, the Kerio family. So I just assumed that it was from my grandmother's family. And I never thought much of it. And many years later, I asked my dad. And my dad said, no, I know nothing of the case. And my granddad is long dead, so I have no idea. And my dad and uncle, they both said, no, we would know about it. So my dad said, maybe, I misheard, maybe my granddad said, she's a cousin, a friend of your dad, because my dad studied law, and this was a terrible case in the justice system. So my dad might have done some kind of a thesis or an expose or some kind of a paper at uni about the case. So he might have been studying the case. And that could be why my granddad he might have said she's a friend of your dad, because I don't know. We just don't know. I definitely did not make that up. I could have misheard, but I did not make that up because for many years I was convinced she was my cousin, So who knows? One day I'll know. When I die, I'll go and ask Jack the Ripper who he was. I'll go and ask Mary Besnard if she's guilty. And I'll go and ask her, are you my cousin? So yeah, that's probably what I will want to find out when I myself go into the other side. And anyway, that's going to be the end of the tour. Thank you very much for coming today. Let me know if you have any questions for me before we go. And sorry about the little sound buffering through the town. That's the thing with YouTube. We're not able to go and check the signal ahead. All we can do is like kind of do a video call with somebody and see how good it goes. With Hego, we had this facility of testing the signal. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Caroline. If you guys took a nice, let's make 13 really, but 7 because six of the bodies really did not have enough arsenic to but it was such a mess, you know. The investigation was so badly run from day one. So yeah, we don't know how many, but she did benefit from those 12 or 13 inheritance at least. Where is Loudun situated? Ducan, it's spelled with a U. Loudun, like 1, 2, 3, Loudun. It's in the department of Vienne. We are maybe 1 hour down from the Loire in Tours, where we were yesterday. So it's not too far from Poitiers. The second trial happened in Poitiers. The first one was in Poitiers. The second one was in Bordeaux, because we are in the region of Poitiers, La Rochelle, Bordeaux. Was she compensated? I don't know. I would assume so, because when you do get wrongly imprisoned, you should. But I don't think she got a big loads of cash. Well, people are still convinced that she was guilty anyway. There really wasn't enough to. To kill her, because she would have been executed. But so yeah, not sure if she did. Right, I don't see any more questions, so I'm gonna let you go. Thanks everyone that tipped. Unfortunately, I'm not able to see it live and thank you live, but thank you very much if you did, or if you do after the tour. It's always really appreciated, and that's the only money we get. We do not get any. Well, at the moment, at least, I do not get any type of money from YouTube. Yeah, I think have couldn't be me, but not not cool. Next is on Thursday. I'm taking you to Saint-Brévin, so that's at the mouth of the Loire, and I'll be on the beach. So we'll see interesting art, and we should have some interesting stories as well. Every time, so some of the emojis, they don't come as emojis, so I see hand pink waving, so waving back. Cool, I don't see any more questions. So thank you for coming today, guys. Anyone that's new to me, you might want to give me a little subscribe on YouTube if you want to make sure you don't miss out the fun next time. And if you want to make sure you can every time I upload, every time I go live, or you can go individually in all the live that I've listed and click the notify me button. Thank you, MP. Thank you, Linda. Thanks, Lethargy. Ducan, I don't think so. We've been by the Office of Tourism. I expected, it's such a big case, I expected a bit of dark tourism, but it doesn't look like it at all. Actually, this morning, so I wasn't 100% sure about the property, so I ran into, there was a young man on the street where she lives. And I was like, hey, excuse me, do you know where Mary Besnard lives? Where was Mary Besnard? And I said, Mary Besnard, the poisoner. And the guy said, oh, I don't know. He believed I was looking for a Mary Besnard living on the street. And I was like, how can he? I didn't realize straight away. And then my sister was like, no, he didn't get you. He clearly didn't. So why would I look for a poisoner anyway? But yeah, some people don't know. And he lived a few houses away, but he said he was new to Loudun. He had been there for a year only. So I was like, I'm new. I don't know everyone yet. I was like, no, but anyway. So yeah, it's not everyone that knows about the cases. Anyway, thank you for coming today. Have a good evening, a good morning, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. Let me flip the camera around so you can see those lovely streets and the baguette. Right. See you soon.